Hi, I'm Kay Eck, and welcome to my podcast, Alive and Kicking Stories of Waking Up. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I have with me today my good friend, Aaron Ogden. Aaron is kind of a magical creature with many, many, many talents, including teaching yoga, leading beautiful yoga and nature retreats, modern permaculture. Is that what it's called? Modern permaculture?
I call it modern permaculture since it's only since the 70s that permaculture has really been a phrase, but really how to work with nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
And shamanic healing and body work and a long, long, long list of skills and talents and assets. So welcome.
Thank you, Kay. It's really, it feels auspicious to be connecting today.
Oh, you always come through on auspicious occasions. I'm starting to think that you're just an auspicious occasion.
Well, all my Indian friends are always like, "Oh, it's an auspicious day," and I'm like, "You always say that, but truly, when you're really in that moment, and it happens to be Valentine's Day,
Oh, that's right. Happy
So
Valentine's
it
Day.
is. There is that universal love
Yeah.
feels auspicious.
Oh, let's tap into that. That feels really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good to be
So,
here.
yeah. So as you know, we're get together for these conversations to talk a little bit about each of our individual paths to waking up. And I just want to start out by asking you, how do you define that? Whether you call it waking up or embodiment or enlightenment or any of the words that may have been, tossed around in our awareness. What do you think about that?
One of my favorite questions, and I feel like even to answer this kind of question requires that awareness of becoming present. Even connecting with you, connecting with even the feeling of my voice, and recognizing that awakening is really a state of being. As I've come to learn, as I practice a lot of the non-dual teachings with my teachers, yogic, shamanic arts, just sitting around a fire, being with nature. And it's really just sensing what is. Yet for almost all of us, because we're in our minds and our minds tend to kind of split things up like a computer program, it has like a problem solution oriented type of mechanism. It tends to there's this experience of being separate. So we have this experience of awakening, like it's undeniable. That's what we call our awakening. Or some people it's continuous, or some people have Kundalini awakening and they feel it like moving through their spine. So yeah, whenever we speak about it in words, it's going to have a dualistic connotation. So it's like there's no such thing as awakening. It's actually really just a removal of the kleshas, of the colorings of the mind where we seemed separate. And so you wake up to realizing you're present and it's just what is. Like the phrase before enlightenment or awakening, chop wood, carry water. After awakening, chop wood, carry water. It's business as usual, yet everything changes without anything needing to change.
Oh, yeah, I have goosebumps on that. I love that because that taking it from being like a happening into a beingness, a state of being, kind of allows for everybody to have a really unique experience with it. Because I think about myself, I have always, it's been like so subtle, so gradual, and so slowly expansive that I couldn't really focus on any one particular moment. But there are people who have those,
Yeah.
moments.
It's great to, I remember reading Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, which was just, as a modern day spiritual teacher, that book came to a lot of us, and he described his process of awakening like there was an event from like one night to the next. And interestingly, I had some kind of simulated awakening while I opened that book and read it. And the thing is, so what I'm saying is the story of one's own awakening can be very amazing. It's like an alchemy. Yet I think what you're describing for yourself is actually, it's such a blessing because we can get trapped in the story. And I'm just telling a story about 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Yet awakening is a state of being, as you're recognizing, it's just little by little. It's just trickling like mist, you know, like every breath, just every day. And it's quite ordinary, but the extraordinary is in the ordinary, you know, that's where you can say it's so auspicious to connect today. And it's like the mind's like, why? Like, give me a good story about it. And it's like,
Yeah.
I just feel the vitality of being alive right now.
Yeah.
And I see it in your face, and it's reflected in everything. And
yeah.
whether it's painful in the moment or going against what I want, you know, so to speak, or whether it's exactly what I want, either way, you know, that when you recognize awakening is a state of being, it's always, you
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
we'll go back to the story and then it'll be like, oh, it's not like that, you know, because you're caught in the story, the mind-made linear time frame of awakening, and then you're actually removing yourself from that state of awakening.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's all a trap.
Yeah. You know, might be a little bit off subject, but I've been experiencing this like incredible vitality and aliveness that I've never felt before. Yet it's like so much quieter and subtler and dropped down. So it's not like, you know, explosions of life and happiness and, you know, blah, blah. It's like really rooted and really just like almost like silent and still, but so incredibly vital,
Yeah.
you know?
I think that's actually right on in line with what we're sharing. It's the subtle energies, like in the spiritual realms of learning about they call it the koshas in yoga, the different sheaths or layerings of the energy. And it's subtle, and subtle tends to be, like you're saying, like a gentle breeze or a breath in, or just noticing the way the light reflects, you know, through the windows behind you as I see, or on someone's face, or, you know, like that's what we call an awakening story. Like suddenly, like in my experience, suddenly I was felt timeless. Suddenly I felt like the witness. I wasn't thinking of Aaron Ogden and his story at all. I felt very embodied. I felt my position I was in. I was reading a book, yet there was this inner experience that became illuminated as so obvious and clear. And even the words I hear, I do this thing where I translate energy into English language because that's the language I speak. And this voice was like, you have everything you've ever wanted is within you right now. And it was like this alchemy that almost repeated infinitely in a way. And my mind stood still. Like I don't recall any thinking, any regular thoughts, noticing the absence of how much regular thought is going on. And it lasted, you know, maybe a short time, 30 seconds to a minute, which is actually quite a while to have that. But it permanently changed something I was 22 years old, that 22-year-old psyche, you know. And then it was like I was practicing yoga a lot, and it was like then I had this like thought, that's what yoga is. And then I laughed, like probably to myself out loud. No one else was there, and I'm like, I've been practicing yoga for years and I had no idea what I was doing, and it was just funny. It was so joyful. It was like such awareness of ignorance, of living in such ignorance.
Yeah.
Yet it was just like opening a door and looking through, suddenly you could see through.
Yeah.
But it was a permanent change. And so this is how, like, this story, I didn't even mean to tell this story, but how that story is ever present. Like it brings that ever present connection, like forward, you know, into our connection.
Yeah. Wow. All right, well, let's roll the clock back a little bit, the calendar back, and tell me about your childhood. You live in Ojai, among other places, but
Yeah.
Ojai, California. Have you always been a West Coast boy?
Yeah, I was born in Ojai. Yeah, I'm based, when I'm in Ojai, I'm periodically traveling all different places. But when I'm in Ojai, I'm on the 11-acre plot that my family has. And so the land of my childhood are the same gardens that I tend to, and the same soil that I play with, and flowers that I grow, views that I see, that when I was 2 to 18 years old, I was raised here on this land. And so
So,
it's unique to come back.
yeah, were your parents, like hippies, or what was their story?
No, no.
No?
Both my parents came from the Midwest where they were raised, both at about 10, 11 years old. They were about 10 years apart. So my dad he actually came through the Theosophical Society. His aunt
Really?
brought him to Happy Valley School in Ojai with his other siblings. And slowly, my grandmother came out, and so the family was out. And then my mom's family, they came out in a station wagon. The story is my grandfather was having heart attacks very early on from being in World War II, and
Mm.
maybe it was partly genetic, but the cold of Ohio, the farming lands was just too intense, and it was recommended they go somewhere sunny. And the 60s, California, it was just becoming world famous, and so my grandmother just moved everyone out. Her 4 kids got rid of everything and landed in Santa Barbara and then Ojai. And my
Wow.
parents ultimately met. Yeah,
So,
great
what
family.
was your childhood like? What was your awareness of yourself as a child and within your family structure?
Mm, I love that, and that's a perfect question because there's so many ways I could answer this, because
Mhm.
there's so many, like, my unique awareness is that there's different sheaths of consciousness. And so, and like, even both my parents had very different ways of seeing the world, different consciousness, different religious views. um, so for instance, I was raised in the Catholic Church, mostly with my mom. My dad was more on the atheist side and even abandoned kind of the new age philosophies of Krishnamurti and the Theosophical Society. And he just was more in the science of the mind, which actually is yoga, but he tended to push away kind of healing arts and the esoterics and that kind of thing. But my awareness was, especially through nature, I was really connected. Everything felt alive to me. Everything spoke to me. The
Mm.
trees were my friends. I grew up climbing on boulders and trees and finding baby birds and nests, and my dad planted avocado orchards and gardens. So I had a lot of that exposure. And I know that it was informing me in such a deep way. I also had a lot of kind of, you could call them alien experiences, star being experiences, like phenomenal experience with ghosts and with paranormal and all that kind of languaging that was quite scary as a young one. And as I've revisited it, I just had a very open energy field. So I was aware of where people were at all times. People
Mm.
are carrying me like my parents or my sisters were born into my life. I'm a full empath, so I can feel someone else like it's me. And I remember that as a young one. And so I got so much information all the time. And I
Mm.
think nature helped me feel grounded and kind of clear and open, because when I was around people and the complexity of our minds and the multi-layered consciousness that humans have been holding, especially I was born in 1978, so that's kind of the time frame of my childhood through the 80s. It's fascinating even to tune into it right now as you ask. Like, so on my own with nature, I was tuned into wholeness of life. There
Mm.
wasn't a lot of thought around it. And then when I was around people, I felt deep, deep emotions.
Mm.
And I don't think I yet, as a young one, could put it together the way I can now, because I've done so much, trauma healing and psychotherapy and somatic healing arts, all this kind of work for decades. Um, but I could tell if someone was really sad and held and bogged down. I could tell if they were very depressed. I could tell if they were very happy. I could tell if they were feeling artistic and creative. I could tell if they were feeling stressed and burdened.
Mm.
And I'm sure as a young one, I took it on and internalized a lot of that. Again, it was perfect for my own healing, for my own development as a human, come
Yeah.
into my humanity.
I mean, you can hardly imagine a more challenging situation to put a young child in than to feel not just their own experience of living, but everybody else's as well. So, did that, I mean, you used nature to cope with that, but how did that affect you, like going through school and in your like childhood relationships?
Yeah, that again, it's so varied. I was blessed to have cousins who were really great friends. We had a lot of fun. I was blessed to have a really good friend growing up, a couple good guy friends. And then when I went into like junior high, like my parents were getting a divorce, the home was going on the market. I went into a public school. And I think what happened was I really got frozen. I just shut down, but I kept going. Like I got through school. I did quite well in school with grades, but socially it was very challenging. And I ultimately made friends, learned social skills, but I was so introverted and so, I think just things shut down. I
Mm.
think my openness to that natural way of being shut down, which for a lot of people through puberty and just the challenges everyone has, we have a similar life story. It just seems so personal. It's my story. um, and I was holding a lot of things for my parents, for
Mm.
loved ones who were close, who were my caregivers. And again, everything just happened. Life just happens. And so they get lodged like deep in the unconscious, and so I was holding a lot of stories,
Yeah.
patterns, energy
Yeah. And
patterns.
it seems that of course, would seem like almost like a defense mechanism or a coping strategy to get
Yeah.
through those really challenging experiences that you had.
Yeah.
Middle school, which I called a black hole.
It was well, and what I learned later on is because the way I really orient is that I was born free. But what I love about astrology too is it's a great like mediumship that helps you see the wheel of life and your own personal story. And mine is to come back home through the body, but also through family and discern.
Mm.
So whether it was my dad's story I was holding, or whether it was just something I was here to learn from, it doesn't really matter anymore. It was both and.
Yeah.
Because when I got older, I left home at 18 to go to college, or many opportunities through my life as an adult. I knew I could consciously choose. I was free. I could make my own decisions. So even that, some of the coping was to hold myself back from freedom and just kind of mull over these old cycles. But I
Mm.
wasn't conscious that I was holding it through my father's lineage or his story, or my parents were both very significant in that. And I
Yeah.
was the firstborn, in the family. So
You were the first
that
what?
I was the firstborn.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, first child. And so it's fascinating, even to be speaking about this, because again, I see everything as these swirling waves of consciousness, depending on how you see it, depending on how you feel it, these different vantage points opening up. So this is fascinating to recall.
yeah. And you are such a a creature of light with so many with access to so much. I can't imagine trying to put that in the box of school or even like relationships,
Yeah,
that
I
seems like it would have
I
been.
do really yeah, I feel really blessed to say this right now. I do really well with all of it. And I feel so fortunate, grateful for all of it. But that's not to say during some of those times, cycles in life, it was deep suffering.
Yeah.
You know, I've definitely been through long periods of portals, I'll call it portals of time cycles, where I did not have the will to be here,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Can you
and I
talk a
was,
little bit about that?
yeah,
I love that you
you
call
know,
that a portal, because
yeah,
that that I mean, that is like there's a deliverance. You're being delivered somewhere through something to
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. Ooh, that gives me the body shivers. I feel the subtle energetics, the state of being that is awakening when I get those goosebumps, you know, and sometimes they kind of flow through my body. Um, you know, my mom is amazing and she really helped kind of keep things going through life, keep me in school, keep, you know, she was a great math tutor, you know, she got the bills paid. She's a very responsible human and very loving, and just really demonstrated that, where my dad was a little more of a kind of abandoning, kind of not as present and active in my life. So by the time I left college at 18, and by the time I was more like 19, my uncle passed away from brain cancer. So it was a very significant time of watching someone pass through that way. And he came to me in my dreams, and he was just a really beautiful person in my life. And so that was tremendous. And basically I was starting to just really make my own decisions and live life on my own. And I didn't see anything. I didn't see how I was going to be. I was taking college classes and nothing. I ended up as a philosophy major because nothing was really resonating really. And I didn't see how philosophy could be a life. And I just didn't see anything. And I remember consciously being like, I don't have the will to live. But I wasn't a depressive that like wouldn't get out of bed, you know, I was functioning, you know, and I was fairly social at that time too. But when night would fall, especially, I would fall into this really deep depression. And I think, picking up on a lot of energies. You know, I was in the middle of Isla Vista, which is a huge drunken playground for like 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds. And just a lot of energies going on. And then my own psyche needing to release things that were being deeply held, even trauma lineages, you know. And I mean, I could go into so much of that. So, you know, I went through a period of really being actively suicidal, and ultimately ending up in the hospital and getting the assistance professionally that was needed. And then a little bit after that, maybe a period of a couple years, then finding yoga and a really amazing teacher. And that started to really, really deeply shift things. And then
Mm.
a couple years after starting yoga, what I just described of having that awakening experience, but realizing, like how you were noticing within me, is so much. In this moment, it feels like there's this wellspring of creative vitality, you know, this essence of being that stems from everything or nothing. It's just within us. And it's like when I was younger, I somehow wasn't tapped into that consciously, and that is necessary. And I think it's necessary for every human. We must, at this time, learn some capacity to go inward into our inner landscape, whether it's eyes closed or the breath. I mean, there's a million techniques, and just living life from the truth of its wellspring,
Yeah.
whether you call it spirit or God. But it it was necessary for me because I wasn't going to make it. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't know who to trust in. There wasn't a religion, there wasn't a spirituality even. It had to come from within me,
Yeah.
the who am I kind of inquiry.
Yeah. Yeah. I found myself in a similar situation to that. I was older than you. I think I already had all of my kids, but I had also let go of the Catholic Church that I had been raised in, including going to school in a Catholic church for 8 years. And I, because I had started practicing yoga, then you're offered some Eastern religions, but to me that was just felt like the same, you know, like different but same. And
Yeah.
I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, and I didn't have like the plan. Like I didn't know, like I can't die now because I don't have a connection to anything. So I have to like be really careful on this tightrope. And it was like way too much stress for me to handle. Way
Yeah.
too much stress. I was so scared. And so I started getting panic attacks,
Mhm.
and really yoga was what saved me, because it's, it's such a gift, because it's a technique for drawing the senses inward and living in the body, which was such a, which is kind of like, my body has always been my temple, because I was really athletic and totally into sports and understood movement as meditation when I was 8 years old. So, yeah, so that I can totally relate to that. But I never thought of it as a portal, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Why did you call it a portal?
Well, as you were just sharing right near the end there, I got that tune in too of, I remember one day I was driving down the road, and just almost the thoughts were around suicide, like I'm like, I just want to be done with this. Like, I can't see the future. I just don't see a place for myself. All this, even whining and complaining, really. But there was suffering. And I was in this portal, and this is actually the presence that I live in. I'm learning that I actually am designed to be in an ever-present portal where ideally there is no past and future, there's just presence. And I'm not going to say that I'm always in that. I operate through the mind all the time, yet I'm aware of that. I'm learning to flower into that each day. And I remember driving, and this voice, again, it was like a voice would come through, and it's like, you don't really want to kill yourself. You just want to be loved. And it was undeniable that it was true. And it even was something like, and you want to share love. And so there was something, and that even, I can feel it in my own heart,
Mm-hmm.
not just like the energy of the heart, but even the organ of the heart, just like almost skipping a beat. And here we are on Valentine's Day. Like, it was like, I mean, love really is the answer. Like, all the cliched memes and phrases, it's like, I couldn't live unless I was expressing, and it's agape love. It's high spiritual love. It's
Yeah.
not just romantic or the fleeting love of loving a perfect day because it's sunny out, or loving that cash flow because you just love the service you're offering the world, or whatever, the new home, whatever it is. Just, it was so clear. And then there was this, I'm always in this open channel with those who have deceased, and it goes not just with my family, it's ancestry of all humans. And then it goes even beyond that, which is maybe another story of different worlds and different entity consciousnesses. But they said, the problem that you're experiencing is going to remain with you even if you kill yourself. And I felt it so clearly that what I was denying myself, or the, so to speak, problem, the agony I felt, I was still going to feel. So I might as well stay here and deal with it.
Wow.
And there was almost this understanding, if I unpack it further, was this, the shamans call it earth school, that I was here learning. And actually, maybe there was a blessing in this, like maybe there was an actual, almost the technique of being human. Well, and this almost gives it's almost like you want to understand you're a spiritual being, but I didn't even have that in my languaging framework yet.
Mm-hmm.
It was maybe a story of Jesus and Mary being, giving birth to a son without having sex, or some of these kind of stories, but it wasn't in my conscious framework. I hadn't thought that deep yet about it, but I understood it to be true, and so there was something that changed there. And I did go into experiences where I was hospitalized and needed help, but I was aware that I needed help. It was the only way at that time that I could start to receive help, because I wasn't yet strong enough in myself, present enough to just say to someone, I need to share love with you, or I need help and I don't know how to go about it.
Yeah.
And maybe partly because I was surrounded by particular peoples who were so consumed in their own story and their own life that they actually weren't present for that.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways I could speak about it, but I find that to be true. And I don't think there's any actual ultimate shame or guilt in killing yourself. I think that actually everything that we feel or judge is our own being is doing that, whether it's projected on that other people judge us or we judge ourselves. We're left with that at the end of the day or the end of the life.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels really true to me. I really trust that. And the thing is, the messages that I get from that trust are wonderful. They feel really good. Like, I'm here to love. It's like, well, that's not such a crazy, like off the wall kind of thing. It's, you know, I'm here to be kind.
Yeah.
I have to be kind. The process of waking up and acknowledging sometimes is being very unkind or rude. Sometimes there's things we have to do. It's like everything that we've ever rejected or resisted or not wanted, if it's a strong feeling, a lot of times it comes to us in this phenomenal game for us to reconcile.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know and
Yeah. Yeah.
even as yeah
And people, will probably want to know that this is the time this is a major time of reconciliation. Like we are, a teacher of mine says that like the things that were tapping you on the shoulder in the past are pretty much going to be slapping you in the face this year.
hmm
So you're not
and
going
if
to
you
have,
don't want to be slapped in the face again, there's probably going to be and this is, I mean, this be a light way to say it, or just let us be playful, but like we'll be slapped again in some way. Like I've attracted some beautiful teachers, and the things that they've shown me, again, this is a klesha, it's the coloring of my mind. I'm like, I expect this teacher to act this way, and if they're, for instance, if they're rude or act in a certain way, then I'm going to be upset. This is like an unconscious program, and then they behave that way, and then I'm like, oh. Yet I'm blessed to have some teachers who are really, as far as I can see, they're so present, and I really feel love from them. And then I'm able to see, oh, that was a trigger. That's what I didn't want to happen. Or I didn't want to be the one to mess it up. Or everyone has their own unique things.
mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, we're also here to accept the blessings that maybe we might see as more positive. So, a lot of us, I think it's Marianne Williamson who's been, she's the modern day mystic teacher who's now like political, and she's really bringing it home. And she's like, maybe it's, you're most afraid of that love. Maybe you're most afraid of that wealth and abundance coming and letting that flow. So, again, it's not to say, oh, you're doomed to always repeat karma that feels negative. The karma can be positive. For me, it's like, accept the freedom that I was born with.
Yeah.
Accept the ability to love, and it doesn't require anyone to be any which way.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are
I
hard
just get
lessons.
to love.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to what you said about love, because it kind of caught me, in that, that voice from, your angel or whoever spoke to you, said that, you're here to love. And of course, like each of us as humans has a sense of that, but there are so many examples of imperfect love and our imperfect ability to love. So it's like you go through these experiences of love, and it's like, that's not good, like that's not better. And then, but it's like you have to go through sort of these machinations of what you think love looks like as a human, until you get drawn back around into your own heart. And then once, like, that's the only perfect love, is you for yourself, right? Like, so once you get that,
You're actually loving it all. And again, this is an idyllic statement, and this is why, being human, all the imperfect loves or the varieties of love, it actually is all love. But when you feel betrayal, or when you feel someone outright like stab your back, or you feel grief of losing something you cherish, I'm trying to create examples that, betrayal is such a good one. It's just like, that person betrayed me, or life is betraying me, or, when something is just not fair and not just. And that's so big, not only in the United States right now, but just it's not fair. It's not just. Why, that why is nature being thrashed? Why can't humanity come together? These really penetrating questions, and to actually feel it as love, or actually to rest back in presence and realize that you can totally express and be in love, and there's betrayal. Everything is love. Everything comes from love. The thing is, and we spoke about this earlier, like the mind interprets a story around it. And the mind is also seeing you as Kay and me as Aaron, and we're separate. And the thing is, in a third dimensional sense, in Earth School, that's true. You are your own entity, your own body, your own mind, and I am too. And I call myself Aaron, and I have this story, and you call yourself Kay, and you have this story, and we can change the stories, and it's so creative. Yet who we really are, that love that we really are, is beyond that, or it doesn't need the story. And I'm really learning this right now, so I'm speaking about it almost a little conceptually, but I'm learning, like, when my heart gets torn open, when your heart breaks, these kind of things with humanity, that we mostly stop at the story of it, and then we have certain responses. Or someone passes away, I'm so sorry they passed away. Or when someone's heart breaks, oh, I hope you feel better. These kind of things. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. There's actually a lot of love caring in it, but it's to start seeing it all the way through, to stay with it and stay. And maybe love isn't the right word anymore. Maybe that vocabulary is like the word God for some people, or even the word Jesus. It has a connotation that takes them away from just being present. And the yoga techniques, I know for both of us, following the breath, being in body, just spreading the hands, just like, body work, touching the face, massaging a muscle, something like that, bringing you more present. And the alchemy is that if you're willing, if you have a sense of enthusiasm or a dedication or devotion to paying attention, I'll stay with this. And I have experience with this too. I've seen the betrayal, and I didn't experience a lack of love. Sometimes I actually experienced a love that was unbridled and immeasurable, and just bringing so much light through what I might describe as the story of my pain, of that betrayal. And it keeps coming up, and we all have our own kind of flavorings of that. Mine definitely is the topic of betrayal. Really, the last like 5 years, it came up really strongly. And the story, I felt very wrapped in the story. Yeah. And then we want to divide ourselves and protect. And then I naturally gravitated toward experiences where the messaging was like, are you trying to protect yourself? And then going back to referencing when I felt more depressed in that portal, which was suicidal, yet at the same time, I was experiencing a direct communication with the other side, or with a guidance that was saying, you have everything you've ever wanted inside of you, and you're here to love. Isn't that true, honey? Honey, darling? Honey, sweetie? It's like the sweetest thing. And then that same sweetness is like, honey, you feel devastated that you feel betrayed by that person, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. And then it's like the second grader, or the young little one. And it's like, yeah. It's just like when a kid pushed us on the playground, ultimate betrayal. Yeah. And a child just gets over it. Adults, we hang on to those stories because it's like, you took my bank account, or you took my home, or like you messed my life up, or all these things. And again, I don't mean to speak flippantly or lightly about it, yet there is a love that is here for us that is causeless, that actually feels to me like it grows and expands and becomes more present even in the darkness of our humanity. Yeah. And it doesn't mean some of us don't say goodbye to people. And sometimes it doesn't end very pleasantly. And maybe that's the one thing we weren't wanting.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I don't want to have to just shut the door on that person, or I don't want to, it's deep little stories that come out. And if we can see what is, and see the brightness of our day and also the darkness, or like, I don't like the way I see humanity, or they're treating that forest, or this, the ethics of that company. And it's like, can we practice seeing it, just to see it at least a little bit each day? I know
Yeah.
that's a lot to ask. Not everyone feels like they have all that time,
Yeah.
but just a breath in and out.
Yeah. And I think maybe another way of putting that is because I think that this could be really, really valuable for people as they struggle through their various
Yeah.
experiences in their lives. But, you know, when you have a situation that is causing you, like there's no way around how you're feeling about it. It's
Yep.
like front and center, and you cannot avoid it. And the other party can, you know, your attention to the other party can take you outside of your experience of it. And if you remain in your experience of it, you can spend the time winding your way around in and out of it, so that you can gain from it what you need to get, or can gain from it. And ultimately that's going to be about you loving you,
Yeah.
giving yourself that time and experience of really sitting in it. Is that right? Is that?
I've, I love that. And I think this is really important to come, because when I speak, in the place I'm speaking from is not a triggered space. It's not a place of trauma release. It's not a place of a situation that has a gravity to it and it's really penetrating. It's not to say there's anything wrong with that. And those are necessary steps. And I personally gone through them again and again. And I'm sure there'll be more opportunities where the question, the alchemy question, I think that helps is, if we ever have enough space, just say, what am I learning today? What am I learning from this right now? You know, sometimes you're learning to be really pissed, and you get to be pissed. You know, sometimes you're learning, I'm going to take the time and grieve. I don't need to know what's next in my life. One of my clients just was sharing with me, and she, you know, she's got a divorce of her husband where she grew up in a kind of where that would never happen kind of story. And she did that, and her parents are passing on, and just her whole life is changing so radically. And she's like, people keep asking me, it's been a couple years, and they're like, so what's next? And she feels like she's supposed to know. And I said, you know, what feels most right is that you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay to not know. It's really powerful, especially in our current circumstances where we need innovation. We need ingenuity. We need to take a break from just going and going and going. You know, even in our political system, clearly things need, whether it's a disruption or just a little break, and hopefully they're just small little pieces. You know, so even in our own lives, like, what's working right now? Like, what am I learning right now? And even if at the end of the day you can take a deep breath in, or just reflect on that question, even if you're like, I can't answer that right now, or I don't even want to, that's even present.
Yeah. I
Because
think one of
situations are that intense for us as humans.
Yeah. I think one of the most important aspects of that is what we were talking about before, is sometimes you're in a situation where you just cannot figure out what the fuck that thing is trying to
Yeah.
tell you. And
Yes.
that's okay too, to just let it, stop chasing it, stop seeking it, stop going after it, and just sit and let it come to you.
Yes.
That is what has been so instructive to me lately, is like, stop pushing myself even there. You know, when I'm trying my hardest to do my best work to, like, you know, work through it the way I know I'm supposed to, sometimes just doesn't happen.
And even, you know, some of the languaging I've already shared, and the kind of the new age spirituality, and especially on social media and things, it's really pumped forward, and sometimes it's just not landing. You know, there's a level of healing traumatic wounds, or post-traumatic stress disorder, and all these different, they're labels, but feeling deeper emotions is so incredibly important. And just like my teacher offers sacred rage and sacred anger ceremonies.
Oh, wow.
And just simply put, she goes, there is a place for this in our world. It is a really healthy, good thing to feel these. And not everyone has the time or the blessing to meet with a teacher and do a ceremony, but even if this could lend, I think, just a voice to that there is a place, and maybe you don't see it in society, but we must make a place for it. It is incredibly, in my own practice, some of the guidance I've shared and moving through those portals of suicide, there was still anger and rage that wanted to come through. And it was sometimes come through situations where I just downright didn't feel like it was allowed, or I didn't know how to access it, or I just didn't even know that that's what was going on, that I was so pissed and unsettled and rejecting the current situation for very good reasons. But it was just like, and usually it's very complex. It's so much. And I think many, many people, this is erupting like a volcano. And some people have, like, even what you were sharing, your experience might be just these little whiffs each day of the subtle gifts of love and presence. That also can actually be the way that it's releasing. Not everyone has to be like, I'm enraged and like be breaking glass and, but sometimes that's the way to do it. And I invite people to know that that's necessary and so important. And it's not also just done,
Right.
sometimes it comes back to be revisited. And that's when we can actually, what I was saying earlier, you can start to see like, wow, that betrayal, I see it. And ultimately it's within me. And I no longer need to betray myself, the love that I am. And this is a place that I'm recognizing, and I want to share it with people, and also share that if that's not fully doing it for you right now, just to like take a breath in and close the eyes and start to feel it. There are so many teachers out there, more and more people coming forward with very just rock solid techniques and ways to really authentically source what you're feeling. And sometimes it's just ugly.
Yeah.
And I see the beauty in what is considered ugly. I see the beauty in all of the atrocities that humans are capable of and just running rampant right now.
Yeah.
And it's not keeping me from recognizing that true source within. And so I'm feeling more love and more beauty, yet I'm able to see everything. And so every day is like, my life on one level looks very beautiful, and I do like yoga retreats, and, I live in beautiful places, and, I'm just like this like smiling white guy that walks around being so privileged and all this. And so much of that is the mask, is there's truth in that, what I was given. And deep down, I feel like there's a responsibility. I remember being called here to love. And so I'm learning how to love.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to move on before I take the opportunity with you to ask you about the unique journey of men on this path, because
Mm,
you and I know, especially in the yoga community, it's predominantly female
yeah.
dominated, as well, and in a sense the spiritual community is as well. So I just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because I feel like that's really needed.
Yeah. And as you said that, I just felt, and again, this, just having an open heart, I know that I don't need to reject anything. And when you started bringing that in, I just almost feel like I want to cry. Like I felt so much sorrow, maybe partly a personal feeling that I know, and then just feeling so many men. I do see that the feminine energy, which tends to look like it's embodied through women, through their biology and neural pathways and society's cultural standards, all of this, but is the feminine principle of receiving, not knowing and always have that plan of action, but to receive love, to receive the plan, the agenda. which is feminine in nature, it is available for men and women equally. And where women biologically, and again, through the way they communicate socially, and I'm mostly a Westerner, but I know a lot of cultures, they tend to, they receive their moon cycle. They receive, especially if you become a mother, I mean, things that men just don't know. Yet there are so many men, and myself included, where I didn't feel like it was safe to act feminine. It was actually, I was endangered on the playground growing up. And especially in my case, I have more of what you might call a queer sexuality. So my sexuality is very open. Predominantly, I'm connect sexually with men. Of course, that's been changing because I'm more in this like agape love. So it's like everything is just pure love. But I'm very versatile in that way, which is maybe consciously a little more unique.
Mm-hmm.
But I just really remember it did not feel safe in my body. And I also was around a lot of women who were actually quite masculine in their energy and even abusive.
Mm.
And a couple of people where I felt physically unsafe. And so I had maybe a unique experience, but more men that I see doing this kind of work and opening up, whether they're sharing with men or just sharing in public, or sometimes on yoga retreats. Often on my yoga retreats, there's men just coming forward and seeing that we're all male and female. We all have the masculine, feminine energies, and it's necessary.
Yeah.
And for women to realize, because there is this storyline that's very real, that women have been shut down and men have been given open access to power. And in this present moment, the opportunity is for a woman to step into her power, but being through that feminine receiving, like a portal receiving, and same with men. But the thing is, a lot of women are stepping into power by using that patriarchal masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very subtle. And the thing is, men are doing that. So we're all in the same playing field now in that way. The challenge is for women to do their work and release in the way they need to. And I know there's so many women's circles, and I invite women to keep doing that, to feel safe with their fellow women, but realizing we're not here to grab that masculine energy. So there might be a lot of quietude. There might be a lot of silence. You might not necessarily step up that corporate ladder. That might not be the way that you're going to show your power. For some it is. It all depends. But I invite everyone to listen in. Same with men. Like, it doesn't mean being a successful man out in the corporate world doesn't mean you have to undo that, but to receive and to participate in noticing when others are receiving. And may we start to congratulate each other and honor each other for receiving, which can look a lot like, I don't know, or I'm stepping back, or maybe I'm not going to execute that plan to really get that next capital gain that fast. The kind of business world that rewards us on doing. Even in the spiritual world, it's like, oh, I have this many retreats and I've launched my new book and I'm doing this, and it's all like, and everyone's like, yeah. And it's like, what about, no, I'm not doing any of that. I'm listening really deeply. Yeah, I support you on that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm going off on a tangent a little bit. For men to embrace listening, to embrace those qualities, to support women's empowerment without them having to like play the same game.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody coming to a place of balance, and
It has to happen. Again, that's why I think certain closed groups or safe groups can allow people their own unique process. But otherwise, like where I come from with my retreats or my work is like, let's find a balance and harmony. And if there's storylines that need to play out, or trauma that needs to be released, or whatever the authentic process is for each person, we'll listen to that and we'll be with it. Ultimately, though, I'm coming from a place of balance and harmony. We're all in the same boat. As they become a conscious to that, and again, unique process for everyone, depending on what cycle they're in, then they can come into that harmony of seeing clearly. And then I do find that the material reality, the phenomenal reality, you interact with it differently. You see it differently. Like, I feel very safe to be more feminine. And now I appear as a leader in that. I get to lead retreats, and I really, sometimes I joke, I get to lead the retreat so I can be how I want to be. I can set the standard, and then it allows, everyone to step up in their own unique way in that fresh aliveness of this moment.
Yeah, because being the boss of your life does not mean you have to be like the muscles. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and everyone has their own unique, some men might have like literal, like a lot of muscular energy, or they might do the heavy lifting, so to speak. But there's plenty of women that do. And some men are much more feminine in nature. Maybe they're not as physically strong, or, everyone's so unique. And just to set a space, a tone in your family, in your community, in your own mindset, that everyone is so unique.
Yeah.
So like, watch when we're just sending out these thought kind of stories about people or projections. It's all happening, and it's not my thought. It's just thoughts that come in.
Yeah. I can foresee a time when, everybody's just allowed to be who they are. And it's like this beautiful ebbing and flowing and coming and going. And, there's, and the interactions that you have is just like, just discovery, and it's not like, there's no bullshit. There's no conditioning.
So many of the kids right now, and I know many parents, regular conversations with their own kids, especially the ones who are like 11, 12, 13, and a little older too. They've been going through this, and it's part of their kind of socializing too, is every day they wake up as a different sex, at least mentally. And some of them are going through a lot more, even they want the physical changes, and it's unique, but it's showing this, the neurology is like changing. People are so fluid, and it can be very confusing and very challenging for the parents.
Yeah.
But if the kids are supported in this, it's helping all of us as humanity start to shift. And it might be kind of radical right now, but it's necessary.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's so awesome. Aaron, are you ready for our lightning round?
Love that. Yes.
Okay. All right. What inspires you? Small question.
I know. Nature, the ecology of the world, and just watching nature's cycles, and then seeing how humans interact with that, for better or worse, politely or rudely. But it's so inspiring to see the cycles of the moon and the sun and the stars and the elements play out. And so I'm pretty obsessed with being in nature every day.
Well, I knew you were going to say that, but not everybody knows you. So, do you have a nickname from your childhood?
When I was younger, it was Aaron, just regular. And then when I was a little older, it was Augie, or AO, like Aaron Ogden, AO, yeah. And then Aaron.
That's cute. Okay, would you want to live as a human forever?
Gosh, I feel like in this auspicious day of connecting, I might want to say yes. And I don't know if I would have ever said that.
Wow. Talk about a portal.
Yeah.
As I was writing the question, I was thinking, like, no, like I want to be other things too.
I don't even know if it's possible, actually. Might even be a more authentic answer. I don't even know if I said yes, and I'm like, can I even say yes? I don't even have any idea what that is.
Yeah, I know. Forever is a long time too. I guess in a way we are forever human, because here we are, human.
And that's what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, present moment. Do you feel as though your life is speeding up or slowing down?
Oh, it's both. It's both. And again, this is in the mind's perception. So as I connect, which is my kind of frontal normal way, like we're connecting in time, space, words, on this call, um, on one way, it really feels like it's speeding up. Yet there's more and more of these opportunities, almost these windows beyond what I call beyond the mind, where I'm just perceiving, the state of being that is awakening. And it tends to feel like that is slowing down,
Mm-hmm.
um, relatively. But what happens is actually it becomes beyond the feeling of fast or slow. And so fast and slow, we're just playing these games out. So again, it gets a little like kind of a little mystical in this realm of discussing, but it's both fast and slow. Things are happening faster than ever. Like I can think about something and it just comes in. Yet at the same time, I am taking a lot of time, like not initiating in the ways I used to. And so, and I'm maybe a little unique, but days on end where I'm not even really talking, where I'm just out with the nature, where I'm not like taking steps toward goals in my life. I'm just living.
Yeah. I think if someone were to observe my life from the outside, they would assume that there's not very much happening, perhaps. But I've never been in a faster life. I feel like everything is so much faster, and yet I am more still in the midst of it. Like
Yes.
I'm
That's the game, I think. That's
yeah,
actually the illusory reality on a collective scale with the internet, social media, the way we communicate and the information we get is incredible. We've already, over 10 years, I think we've gotten used to so much,
yeah,
our neural pathways, yet at the same time, almost in relationship, it's like yoga, the duality of yoga that's so fast, and yet there's this like stillness, I think is a better word than even slow.
yeah.
There's such a connection to stillness. Yeah.
I think there actually is some sort of scientific phenomenon that says, that you go so fast you stop.
Yeah. It's like an athlete,
Yeah.
a sprinter who just suddenly we practice just like the yoga techniques or all different techniques. You practice the breath moving in and out. You practice these rapid fire movements. And then a lot of, especially pro athletes, especially the professional ones, where they just stay at it. There's the zone.
Yeah.
There's the zone, and
I
it
love
doesn't
the
have
zone.
any kind of spiritual languaging or architecture. It's a real scientific experience with our neural pathways and our
Yeah.
ability to focus.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Do you watch TV?
I'm the classic got rid of TV like 2 decades ago, and now I like have Netflix. So the
What do you
last 10 years since moving back to California, I got on sharing a Netflix account with someone and slowly started watching certain shows. And now I go in and out of getting really into Netflix, it becoming habitual as my downtime, my
Yeah.
relaxation kind of pleasure time.
Yeah.
I also love watching movies and videos because they are all symbols to me. So
Hmm.
it's entertainment, but it's also raising consciousness. Sometimes it's just, vegging out a little bit, but so no regular TV.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So that concludes our lightning round. Do you have a question for me today?
Yes. And, I've been thinking about this question a bit, and it feels a little bit kind of married together with a question that just feels alive all the time. But I know you're the perfect person to ask this to. So the disclaimer, it's about intuition. And the disclaimer is I already know you know what intuition is for you and you practice it regularly.
Mhm.
So people might answer this differently, but for you, Kay, like how are you finding that intuition is a vital aspect in your day-to-day living?
Yeah. Um,
Or maybe even what is intuition to you,
yeah.
and how is that a vital aspect in your day-to-day living?
Yeah. It's funny because I was just talking to our mutual friend, Thea, who is very involved in the intuitive process. And she asked me the similar question. So I'm going to try and think about it a little differently so I can, offer a different side of it. But I used to think that intuition was a response to a question that came from a different part of my body. So I can answer, there's a way to put my mind to the question. But some questions don't really, the mind isn't really that good at answering them. So I used to have this mental top-down feeling, and my intuition actually rises from like my solar plexus up to my heart. Mm-hmm. But I found now that I have come to a place where I don't know whether it's because my mind is so tame now after years of practicing that, or whether the two have actually met in my heart center. And because obviously there are times that when we need to think, and but probably not as often as we think. Like if you think about out driving in traffic, I find myself driving so much more intuitively than mentally. And so, it's more fluid. I don't have to worry about things. I have developed like greater and greater and greater trust in it. So it's coming into more aspects of my life, more areas. Yeah.
I love that you spoke about trust. That's ringing true so much. Like it might even be the question is, how do we trust?
Yeah. Practice.
Whether it's, and I know you're somatically like body oriented with your practices as a yogi. And all of us are in bodies. We're all yogis. We're connecting. But I love hearing how that intuition can feel physically oriented, like intuitive movement, or even hands on the steering wheel, like intuitively driving without, the mind always has a goal or a solution at hand. And yet intuition, what I'm hearing from you too, is you're trusting the process, not just primarily occupied on, I got to get here, or I got to get that done, or how is this a means to the end?
Yeah.
It's just a means to the means.
And I think one of the ways that I began to trust the intuition was when I was working through like really periods of my life where I had like ginormous to-do lists. Like, I raised 4 kids, I started a business, I ran a business. And so, those lists can get really long. And to look at the list, it would seem overwhelming. But I would sit every morning and just be quiet and trust that my life was going to order the list in such a way that I just had to do what came to mind next, and that was going to be enough. No matter what needed to get done, what I got done that day was enough, that I could feel peaceful and relaxed, and that I had made progress.
I think that's so key, is intuitive prioritization.
Yeah.
Especially in this day where, well, I mean, for decades we've been living this in the modern world, that there's this to-do list and things that need to be done, and it doesn't always have to make sense. Trusting intuition says, no, this needs to be tended to. So it can be very practical.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I use it very practically. Yeah.
I love that.
So thank you so much for being with me today. I have enjoyed every minute. You're such a light and I'm so thrilled to have you in my orbit. I wish I could talk to you more often. Yeah, I want to encourage everybody to check out the notes in the podcast so that they can connect with you, maybe join up with you on one of your retreats along with me, which I'm planning to do. But you also offer all kinds of astrology services and yoga and healing, and you're just a carrier of the light and always have wise things to say. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kay. Such a pleasure and honor.
Thank you.